Well, good evening, everybody. This is Roberto. Let me know if you can hear me out there so there are no technical difficulties. Just send me a quick note here if you would, please. I'd appreciate it. We're going to start the meeting here in about 30 seconds. Okay, guys, we're going to start the show up here. Now, I want to say good evening to everybody. As you know, this is Roberto Parker with Innovative Sports Training. And tonight's topic is going to be a fun topic. I want you to have an open mind, have a piece of paper, a pen, a pencil ready to take some notes. Now I'm going to go over a lot of different stuff here. I'm going to go fast at times. I'm going to go kind of slow at times. There's some things I'm going to kind of brush over. What I do recommend to you is that you take a picture of your screen, because trying to explain every single menu and recipe would be very, very time consumptive. We'd be here till about midnight. So take a picture of your screen if you would, if you're in front of a laptop. That would be the best thing to do. Or afterwards, you can go to my YouTube page and check out the podcast. Give me about an hour or two to download the podcast to my YouTube page. Okay, let's talk about tonight's topic here, menus and recipes. Now, as most of you know, I'm a very big believer in paleo and also ketogenic style of eating. Now, I'm not going to explain the real nitty-gritty details of that tonight. I've already had a couple shows on that. But basically what that is high fat, low carb, moderate amounts of protein. And the reason is for that, I believe that we should eat as our primitive ancestors used to eat. Before we had agricultural society 10,000 years ago is about when it started. We would feast, or we would famine, we would hunt, and we would gather. We'd go out, hunt, kill it, and drag it home. And mainly it was plant sources and or animal sources. Turn off my phone here before it rings. I don't want any distractions. There we go. Okay, now let's move on and get this thing rolling here, okay? Okay, these are your basic macronutrients. Everybody's heard of these. Protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Protein, fat, and carbohydrates. These are the macronutrients. They're not the micronutrients. We're not going to talk much about those tonight. We will a little bit, but they're mainly macronutrients. These are the main nutrients that your body needs to function. And let me say this about protein. Protein, we do not manufacture ourselves. We must have an intake of protein to survive. Fat is essential. We must have an intake of fat to survive. Carbohydrates are not essential, and most people don't know that. They're not aware of that. You can survive without significant amounts of carbohydrates. You don't need a lot of them. Let's go over fat percentages. Imagine these pie charts being your plate here, guys. 60% of your plate is full, let's say 2/3, and 90% of your plate is full of fat. Now, some people are saying, wow, that's a lot of fat, Roberto. Well, let me go over this in more detail. As I said, I believe we should eat the way that our primitive ancestors used to eat. They were hunters and they were gatherers. If you are a grossly obese person, really over fat, I recommend you eat 90% fat. Now, a person might be saying, wow, that goes against everything I've ever heard before, right? True, it has. It probably goes against that. But here's the thing. I'm going to use an analogy of using livestock animals. If I want to get a cow fat for market, what type of food am I going to feed that animal? The answer is high amounts of starches and grains. Yes, that's what gets you fat. Now, on the same token, if I feed mainly let's say coconut oil to that same cow, what would happen to that cow? They'd probably lean up. Interesting, isn't it? But yet, many Americans overconsume carbs and underconsume fat because they think it's going to make them fat. It does not. It works just the opposite. Now, going back to what I was talking about here, if you are grossly obese or over fat, I recommend a 90%. So, roughly about 9/10 of your plate should be mainly fat. Moderate amount, if you're moderately over fat, 70 to 90%. Maintenance, 60 to 70%. Sources, avocado, wild caught, ocean fish, olives, coconuts, coconut oil, wild game, cage-free eggs, palm oil, wild trout, nuts. Focus on omega-3s. Omega-3s are the types of fats that are more anti-inflammatory. They do not promote inflammation. Now, if you have your camera with you, your phone or something, take a picture of that reference on the bottom there, that URL, because that is a good source of more good quality fats. And there'll be a lot of that tonight, because otherwise I do not have time to go over each and every detail of fat, carbohydrate, and protein. So we're going to hit on some sources really hard and some not so hard, okay? And here's a good source of fat that I use myself, just pure coconut oil. Now you can buy this at any health food store. You can buy it at Hy-Vee. You can buy it at Price Chopper in the health food area. Any source of good virgin coconut oil. Do not get refined coconut oil because that's been processed. This is raw virgin coconut oil. Now look at the grams of fat in there. 14 grams of fat. This is just 1 tablespoon. 0 grams of carbohydrates. 0 grams of protein. Often what I do in the morning sometimes is I'll just take a scoop of coconut oil and I'll just eat it plain. And that, it doesn't really fill you up necessarily, but it gives you plenty of energy. And the body uses it as mainly energy without being stored as body fat. Good thing to take before you work out or go for a run or something. Carbohydrates. Intake of 10 to 35% from quality sources. About 1/3 of your plate should be carbs, possibly down to maybe 5 to 10%. Now, a grossly obese person and over fat, about 10% of your eating, of your plate should be carbohydrates, or maybe even a little bit less than that. Some people I might even take down to 5%. Moderately over fat, about 10 to 15%. By the way, guys, if you want to ask questions during this presentation, feel free to do so. I'm going to address questions here in about 5 minutes. Maintenance. If you're in more of a maintenance phase of what you're doing with your body, about 20 to 30% of carbohydrates. If you're big time into heavy duty training, heavy weightlifting, triathlete, if you're doing a lot of running or heavy physical labor, about 30 to 35%. Now, why is that? Because you're wanting to feed the muscles more glycogen, because you're going to burn it off faster. That's the reason. Whereas a person who is not real physically active, if they're consuming too much carbohydrates, they will store it as body fat. The best sources of carbohydrates: fibrous veggies, dark berries, green tip bananas, green apples, dark green leaf vegetables. Protein, about 10 to 35% as well. Grossly obese over fat, about 10 to 20%. Moderately over fat and physically active, 10 to 20%. Maintenance, 20 to 30%. If you're into heavy duty working out or heavy duty labor, about 25 to 35%. Now let me say this about protein. There's a lot of people who are not aware of this. If you are not into heavy physical labor or training heavy, athletically speaking, if you are over consuming protein, protein can turn to glucose. Glucose is basically carbohydrate. It's sugar. In your body, that glucose will convert to fat if it's not used properly. Can also elevate triglyceride levels. It can jack with your cholesterol levels. Let me say that again. Protein, if not utilized correctly by the body, will convert to glucose, which can lead to insulin resistance. For example, if you're eating a diet that consists of, well, I'm going to eat really, really low carbs and high protein. Well, that's okay, but if you're not active enough, guess what? The body's going to compensate by converting protein to glucose. Now, a lot of people aren't aware of that, but that's very, very true. Okay, I got a couple questions coming in. I'll address that in a second here. All right, gut healing. Now, this is a big problem with many, many people in our westernized society because of the way we eat, so much processed foods. These are some good gut healing type of foods that this is not me, guys. I've done a lot of research on all this stuff. These are foods that the experts out there recommend, people that have been doing nutritional therapy for years, people that are naturopaths, been doing this stuff for years. These are the foods that they recommend. The top 7 or 8. Bone broth, wild-caught salmon, herb, slippery elm, licorice, plantain marshmallows, and yarrow. Fermented vegetables, cooked vegetables. Now, cooked vegetables could be, don't overcook your vegetables, just slightly cook them. Prebiotics. Prebiotics are things like garlic and artichokes and asparagus. Prebiotics actually feed probiotics. Probiotics are basically things like bone broth, things that you ferment that you put into your gut. Now, to learn more about this, write that URL down at the bottom or take a picture of your screen there. Okay, we got a question here from Neil and Tiffany Bakulski. Coconut oil, is that good for fasting? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you're consuming mainly fat in your eating, in fact, if it's all fat, your body actually reads that as kind of a fasting state in the first place. So yes, coconut oil is absolutely good to fast with. And I also would recommend possibly bone broth. Make clear bone broth. That's a good food to fast with. Keep the questions coming, guys. I appreciate that. See if there's any more questions here. Nope, no more. Okay, now speaking of bone broth, okay, here we go. Okay, now this is bone broth here, guys. On the left-hand side is clear broth. These are two different types of broths here. On the left-hand side is more of a chicken broth that I made. And on the right-hand side, that's more of a beef broth that I made out of rib bones and some other bones from a cow. Now, that bone has marrow in it, and with the bone broth, you want to put a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there, about 2 tablespoons. You can put vegetables in there if you want to make it more of a soup, make it more of a thicker type of broth, or make it more hearty. They're both good. So now if you're fasting and you're taking broth, you want more clear broth. You don't want a lot of other hard food products in there. So I would just go with a clear broth if you're fasting. But anyway, bone broth is very, very good for the gut in terms of gut healing. It's good for getting those good probiotics into your system. Now, the way you do it, you fill the crock pot with bones and cold water. Add about, maybe I'm going to say a tablespoon or less of vinegar. And you cook it for 18 to 24 hours. And that's it. Once in a while, open it up and stir it around a little bit, and that's pretty much it. You cook it for about 18 to 24 hours. Now, you have to cook it a long time for the minerals to seep into the broth, and that's the reason you put the vinegar in there, because the vinegar kind of helps draw the nutrients from the bones into the broth. Okay. Seeing any questions here? All right, next slide. No questions. Okay, brain boosting type of foods. Bone broth again, there we go. Avocado, eggs, fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines. Now some of you are probably saying like, yuck. Um, you know, if you don't like fish necessarily by itself, mix it in with a salad or something like that. Nut butters. Now nut butters can be peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, pecan butter, and I make my own actually, which I'll go over here in a minute. Dark berries are good, dark chocolate, fresh beets, and green tea. Now there is a Dr. Josh Axe. I got this list from him, and if you take a picture of that URL down at the very bottom there, you can go to his website, and he's got a ton of information on brain boosting type of foods. Question from Julie: you mix the broth with what to eat? Now, I guess what she means by that is, can you have any other foods with your broth? Of course you can. You can have broth with, you know, chicken or something. You could have broth with some paleo bread or something like that. I mean, not regular bread. I said paleo bread, which has no flour in it. You could just drink. You could eat it or drink it by itself. The best way for it to work on the body, though, is by itself. So when you're fasting, in fact, I've actually done fasting where I've just used plain, clear broth. Now, it's not going to stuff you like having a big Thanksgiving dinner, but it will sustain you. Let's just say that. And it actually gives you a lot of energy when you do that. But look up these different types of foods here on Dr. Axe's website. Most of the stuff I'm giving you tonight, guys, is not from me. It's from the people out there that know a lot more about this stuff than I do, and I've learned from them over the years. Okay, next slide. ADHD, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. Now, I know I have a few school teachers out there listening to this. This would be good for you guys. A lot of ADHD is related to not healthy gut. That's what it's related to pretty much. And so is many other neurological disorders. But if you heal the gut, typically the brain will heal. The brain will improve its function. Now, the types of foods: goat cheese, apples, fatty fish, eggs, walnuts, Brazil nuts, vitamin D, and a ketogenic diet, meaning very, very high fat, low carbs. Now, you might be seeing a pattern here already, guys. You can see how important fat is to the body, how important fat is to the brain. If you're not getting enough fat, the brain and the gut will not function as they should. Therefore, when the brain and the gut are not functioning, guess what? It affects your muscles, it affects your joints, it affects tendons, ligaments, it affects so many other peripheral areas of the body that you're not even aware of. So it's important you do that. Foods on the go. Now, this is where a lot of people drop the ball. They say, well, Roberto, I'm always in a hurry. I never have time to make foods. I just don't have the time. Well, you got to take a little bit of time, but my recommendation to you is that you make a big pot of food or whatever and stick it in the freezer and just organize it. Have it to where it's at your fingertips. Spend one day making a big batch of food and organize for the week, for the whole week. That's my recommendation to you. Now at the bottom there's a couple of websites you can go to look up some more information on this. Okay, now here is a recipe. We'll spend a little bit of time on this one. Okay, almond nut butter protein bars. That sounds pretty yummy, doesn't it? And what this is, it takes about 35 minutes to cook. And you use a cup of gluten-free oats, 1 cup of bone broth protein. You can also buy powder out there that's bone broth. You can buy it at health food stores. In fact, I've seen it at Hy-Vee. You can buy it there, or you can go to Sprouts, or you can go to natural grocers here in town or Whole Foods. 1/4 cup of honey, 2 mashed ripe bananas. Now, once again, though, be careful with that. If you're trying to reduce the amount of sugar relative to your body weight, I would probably go with bananas that are not as ripe. 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and you can read the directions there. 8x8 pan with coconut oil lined with parchment paper and set aside. In a small bowl, add in oats, protein powder, and stir. Mixing bowl, add in almond butter, honey, banana, eggs, vanilla extract. Mix almond butter mixture until well combined. Pour in oat mixture and stir again. Spread batter into pan. Bake about 30 minutes until firm. Let the bars cool before cutting and serving. Now, I've never made this particular type of bar myself. I have done other protein bars that you did not have to put in the oven, but this is just another type by Dr. Axe. Okay, now here's another good one. Okay, I got a question. Go back to the last URL. I'll do that for just a few seconds here if I can. Let's see here. There we go. There you go. There is no URL on this, guys. You can just look this up in Dr. Axe's website. One more. Okay, foods on the go. There you go. Neil and Tiffany asked about going back a couple slides. My recommendation to you guys, if you can take a picture of the screen, that would save us a lot of time here, okay? So now I'm going to go forward a couple of slides. Okay, getting back to baked eggs in nests. Copy that website down there. There's a recipe for that. That looks pretty yummy. It's basically, that's like a boiled egg on, I can't really tell what those are down there, but some sort of a potato maybe. Some bacon crisps on there and some pepper and some sea salt, and go to town with it. Looks pretty delicious. I'm moving on to the next slide. Eggs and avocado. Now, this is one I've not done yet myself. I eat a lot of avocados. I usually just pour scramble my eggs and sprinkle sprinkle the eggs over my avocados. But I'm not going to go over the preparation and serving suggestions. I'll let you guys read that. But I'll go over the nutritional breakdown of this. 26 grams of fat, carbohydrates 2.6 grams, protein 9 grams, fiber 10 grams. Percentage of fat, protein, and carbs, 54% fat, 18% protein, 5% carbohydrates. A little bit below what I recommend, but close enough, 54%. So well over half of your plate there is fat, and good, healthy fats. Now, on the eggs, it should say in there, I would also recommend getting cage-free eggs. You could probably put a little bit of ground up black pepper on there if you want to spice it up a little bit. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Now, carrot juice smoothie. Now, what do you notice about the nutritional breakdown here? 7% fat, not very high there, is it? Now, this is a high carb drink. Protein, 13%. Carbohydrates, 54%. Fiber, 23%. Now, what I would do on this right here, guys, this is a good drink to have directly after you work out. Why? Because the body's going to utilize it much faster. If you have this drink late at night before you go to bed, that is not good, because now your body will not break down the sugar and use the carbohydrate as efficiently as it should. Now, if I'm working with a person who's really overweight, I would not even have them drink this. This is something I would give to a highly trained athlete, a person who works out on a regular basis. This is something you could drink directly after you work out. Ingredients: 3 cups of pure carrot juice, ½ cup of blueberries, ½ cup of raspberries, 3 cups, 3/4 of a cup of goat feta cheese or plain yogurt, 1 whole banana, green tip preferably, heaping teaspoon of protein powder, and I use hemp protein, which is more of a plant source. I put in some spinach leaves, mix it up in a power blender, and that's it. It has a lot of good fiber in it. A lot of good micronutrients in there too. A lot of zinc and that kind of thing. And B vitamins. Okay, moving on here, guys. Almond butter protein. Protein slash fat smoothie. The breakdown is 55% fat, protein 32%, carbs 5%, fiber 7%. Ingredients. This is one of my favorite drinks here, by the way. I use unsweetened almond milk. I use 1.5 tablespoons of homemade almond butter. I make it myself. 1 tablespoon of butter. Yes, I put butter in my shakes. More fat. 2 ounces of feta cheese. 1 whole banana. Mix it up in a power blender, and it's very, very delicious. 55% fat, 32% protein, 5% carbs, 7% fiber. Good drink to have. If you want, you could also add a little bit of protein powder in that. Okay, trying to get my slide to go there. There we go. Okay, we're moving on to another section here. No, we're not. I'm sorry. Island Blast Green Smoothie. Now, this is mainly a lot of vegetables and some fruit. You're looking at cucumber, celery, ginger, coconut water, parsley, and a banana. I do not have the how to make this. It's pretty self-explanatory. You put it in a blender and you mix it up. That's pretty self-explanatory, but the website is right there, guys. I believe that is from, that's not from Dr. Axe, it's from another, it's, let's see here, Lexel and somethingkitchen.com. Don't know exactly where that's from. I have to look it up in my other notes. But anyway, you can look that up on that website. And there's plenty of websites out there, guys, that have some really good recipes. Avocado green smoothie. Once again, it's that same website, different page on the website. And I can tell you what this is made of. Offhand, it's made of avocados, and you could put in some sort of almond milk or coconut milk. You might add a little bit of protein to it, and that's how you make it. Plenty of good fat and fiber in there. A lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. And potassium. Okay, now we get into some different categories here. Sample meals. Okay, now guys, on this, this is, let's see here. Move my thing around here, okay. Baked salmon, green beans, and blistered tomatoes. And here is a website for that. That is fish, tomatoes, green beans. It looks pretty good. And you can also cook that in coconut oil or butter to add more fat to it, and it gives it a lot more flavor. Okay? If you guys have any questions, fire away at me. I'm moving on to the next slide. Okay, this is one that I've made myself. That's a garden green salad. And with the chicken there, I rolled it in almond meal and eggs. It's kind of like making fried chicken, except it's a little healthier. In fact, it's a lot healthier. And you could even grill it on a grill if you want to. But I cooked it in a pan with butter in it. Fresh spinach, fresh tomatoes, avocados, and mushrooms. Grilled steak and sweet potatoes. Now, On the sweet potatoes, in fact, on all this food here on this plate, I cooked it on a grill. Now, I would not serve this meal to someone who was trying to lose a lot of weight. Sweet potatoes are good, but sweet potatoes will still mess with your insulin just a little bit. Not as much as white potatoes, not nearly as much. A small amount of sweet potatoes actually are very good, but you can overdo it on them. But I would not put a person on this who's trying to take off a lot of body fat. Everything, like I said, it was grilled on the grill. I grilled it in a pan with coconut oil and butter to give it more flavor. Cauliflower, broccoli, and carrots and butter. Pretty good stuff. Turkey sausage medley. Fat 38%, protein 38%, fiber 14%, carbohydrates 10%. Ingredients. The ingredients on that is, okay, ingredients, homemade sausage. Now with homemade sausage, the way I make my sausage, it's from scratch with sage, mustard seed, black pepper, sea salt, diced garlic, and cloves. Garlic cloves, I should say. And also sometimes we'll add some onions to that. Greek olives and scrambled eggs. That's what's on my plate there. It's about 38% fat, 30% protein. Fiber 14%, carbs 10%. Hope you're getting some ideas here, guys. Pancakes. Now these pancakes, you have to look it up on Dr. Axe's website. These pancakes are made with coconut flour and or almond flour. And before you make these pancakes, the flour, make sure you put it in a sifter, because almond flour especially tends to clunk up a little bit, so put it in a sifter. But you can go to his website there to check out how to make them. Pretty self-explanatory if you made pancakes from scratch before. These are made from scratch, by the way, and there's a little bit of coconut on top with some blueberries there. Okay, pizza casserole, and that is made with zucchini squash, I believe. Is zucchini squash or is banana squash? One of those two. Some sort of squash it's made with. Once again, that's in Dr. Axe's website there. You can look up his recipe. It's pretty good. It looks like they sprinkle some Parmesan cheese or something on there too. Pretty good. Okay. Spaghetti squash. Thank you, Neil and Tiffany. Yes, spaghetti squash. Pretty good stuff. Good source of fiber. Okay, let's talk about fermented foods here. I'm moving kind of faster now, guys. Why fermented foods? It's a good probiotic. There's a microflora that lives in fermented foods that creates a healthy coating of the stomach that protects us against pathogens such as E. coli and salmonella. It also reduces sugar cravings. It fights against Candida albicans. If you don't know what Candida is, that's pretty much a yeast inside your body. It also increases antibodies and strengthens the immune system. Now here are a couple of websites you can go learn more about fermented foods and fermented recipes. Paleo Leap, and once again, Dr. Axe's website there. Take a picture of the screen there because I'm going to change the slide here in about 5 seconds. But fermented foods is good stuff, guys, and it's not that hard to do. You get yourself a glass jar, and with some, I use Himalayan sea salt, or pink salt I should say, or sea salt, and you got to put salt in there. Before we had refrigeration, ancient civilizations, and in fact some countries still do this, third world countries, they use salt to ferment their foods to keep it fresh because they don't have refrigeration. In fact, wars in medieval times were started over countries that had supplies of salt, because salt was a very, very, very important commodity in those days. More about fermented foods. Here's a couple picks. At the top left there are mixed vegetables. Now I let that ferment for about a week in that glass jar there. You have to use glass. Don't use plastic. Do not ever use plastic to store any of your foods. Fruit medley, right there. You can look that up. Once again, that's Paleo Leap. Go to their website. At the bottom there is sauerkraut, which is really just cabbage is what it is. And once that cabbage ferments, it becomes sauerkraut. And it's very, very, very healthy for the gut. You talk about putting some good stuff in your gut. Fermented foods, fermented vegetables is the way to go. You can also ferment meats too, but it's a little bit more complicated. You have to be a little careful with that so you don't develop any bacteria. But fermented vegetables are probably the simplest to make. Fruits are a little bit more complicated. Meats are even more complicated. But it can be done. Condiments, stuff you like to put on your foods. Homemade mayo. This is another Parker special here. And what I do on this, I use 4 to 5 hard-boiled eggs, a cup of olive oil, virgin olive oil, raw garlic, tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, half cup of raw onion, 2 teaspoons of sea salt, 2 teaspoons of black ground pepper. I put everything in the blender. I mix it up. Now, if you want a thicker consistency, you use more eggs. If you want it to be more like salad dressing, you use less eggs or more oil. Okay? But that's how you do it. The breakdown, 54% fat, 29% protein, 13% carbs. Man, I use this homemade mayo for a lot of stuff, man. I put it on eggs. I put it on meats. Sometimes I'll just scoop it up and just eat it by itself. It is really good. Now, you don't have to put the pepper in there or the salt in there if you don't want that stuff in there, but I like my mayo kind of spicy. And you're not going to find this type of mayo on the shelf in the store, guys. This is homemade stuff you got to do yourself. And it's really, really good. This is probably one of my favorites. All right, here we go. Almond butter. Ingredients: 2 cups of raw almonds, 1 to 2 cups of olive oil or peanut oil. Now, pretty simple. You have to use a power blender on this. Don't use some cheap little blender from Walmart. It's not going to work because you'll burn the motor out. Those almonds are pretty thick and dense and it'll overwork the motor. And you can also mess the blades up in there. Blend the ingredients with a powerful blender to your desired consistency. You can get one of those Vitamixes. Ninjas work pretty good. Health Master, I believe they're called. That's what I have. I also have a little magic bullet. But anyway, serving size is 1 cup. That's about 18.5 grams of fat, 9 grams of carbohydrates, and 20 grams of protein. Percentage-wise, you're looking at 39% fat, 42% protein, 18% carbs. Now, here's the thing about almond butter. Let's just call it nut butter. If you want more fat and less protein, use macadamia nuts. Macadamia nuts have a lot more fat than almonds. Okay? But you have to really look at the ingredients of, the nutritional breakdown of different types of nuts, because some nuts have more fat, some nuts have more protein, some nuts have more fiber. And if you're allergic to nuts, don't eat them, period. Just don't eat them. And some people might be asking themselves, what about peanuts? You can use peanuts as well in the same type of recipe here. Peanuts technically are not really nuts. They're considered legumes. Peanuts are probably the least healthiest nut, if you want to call it that there is. Almonds are probably at the top of the list. Also, Brazil nuts are up there too, and walnuts. Okay, moving on to the next slide, guys. Hope you're learning something here. Other condiments. Now, at the very bottom page there's a page on Paleo Leap you can go to that has a lot of condiments, homemade ketchup, homemade mustard, homemade barbecue sauce. John Rose, are you out there listening? I know you like making that barbecue sauce. Okay? You can do all this stuff homemade, guys, and you can add any sort of flair to it you want to by spicing it up more or making it more tangy or a little bit more sour or however you want to do it. Okay? However you want to do it. I mean, you can customize it the way you want to do it. Isn't this a lot better than buying stuff off the shelf? Plus, it's a lot less expensive to do this. And the stuff that you don't use, you can freeze it. You can freeze it. And once you get low on the stuff that's not frozen, take it out of the freezer, let it thaw out, and have it ready for the next couple of days. Hope everybody got that website. Oh, we're almost finished here. Okay. I'm going to go back to that. Okay, I'm going to go back one page here, guys. We're not done yet. Okay, now you can contact me for training and consultation, guys. I work with people in the area of lab assessment, sports performance, interval training, private sessions, semi-private sessions. You know my phone number, you know my website, you know my email, guys. You know the kind of stuff that I offer. I'm more than happy to work with you. And right now, I'm going to open up for some questions, guys, and ask away. I am listening. If you have any questions regarding food, recipes, nutrition, so now's the time to ask. Now, my next webinar, we are going to, I don't know when I'm going to do it yet. It may not be next month. It may be the month after next. But we're going to talk about beauty from the inside out. I put December 28th. That's a tentative date. And that's towards the end of December. That is a tentative date, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that. Beauty from the inside out. We're going to talk about skincare. We're going to talk about types of things that can help your skin, your hair, and just your overall appearance. So anyway, guys, going back to what I talked about earlier in this webinar tonight, the most important thing is that you're consuming enough good quality fats in your eating, because fats is where it's at. Now, let me break that down a little bit. There are bad fats and there are good fats. Now, bad fats are things like hot dogs, salamis, bologna, those types of fats, processed fats that you come with Kraft cheeses and those types. Those are processed trans fats that are bad. They can cause insulin problems and heart disease issues. You want to have good, wholesome fats. We're talking avocados. We're talking nut butters. We're talking wild-caught fish, wild-caught animals. I don't know how many people are into hunting out there, but you go out and you hunt an animal down, and a deer, that's wild-caught. Now, the thing about even wild animals that you shoot, if they've been feeding off of some sort of a pasture or field that's been sprayed with a lot of pesticides, keep in mind that'll be possibly passed on to you too. So there's all kinds of toxins out there. The best thing to do is buy as much organic foods as you can, buy as much whole foods as you can. Is it more expensive? Yes. And trust me, I know that because my food bill every month is up there. I place a lot of energy and emphasis in buying good, healthy foods. But my saying is this, and you've probably heard this before, guys: pay me now or pay me later. If you're eating crap food right now, trust me, it's gonna have some bad side effects down the road, and you have to go to the doctor, get your gallbladder taken out, or get your part of your stomach removed, or you have some sort of heart disease or some other thing. Maybe you're insulin resistant, type 2 diabetic, you have very high triglycerides. And by the way, a lot of people aren't aware of this. Alzheimer's is considered type 3 diabetes. That's right, by more naturopathic type doctors. It is considered type 3 diabetes. You have to take care of the gut. You heal the gut first. For every message that the brain sends to the gut sends 9 messages back to the brain. Now that's not my quote. That's a quote by Dr. Tom O'Brien, who is a naturopathic doctor that I've been doing a lot of research on. And I've actually attended some of his webinars and listened to his podcast. I'll say that again. For every message that the brain sends to your gut, the gut sends 9 messages back to the brain. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're not taking care of your gut, it can mess with your brain. Can you say Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ADHD? Those things are all affected by the gut. Is it reversible? Are those things reversible? Yes, they can be. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Guys, are there any questions out there? I'll give you a couple more minutes, and if not, we're going to wrap this up. I just hope that everybody learned something tonight. And the next session we're going to have is going to be beauty and health from the inside out. I hope that everybody will attend that and tell your friends and tell your family. Guys, these webinars are free of charge, and the information that you learn is invaluable. I try not to go in too much detail. I don't want to go over your head too much and get too technical, because I know I'm not talking to people in the profession that I'm in. I can get a lot more technical, but I don't really want to, because you wouldn't be able to understand it, most of you. I'm not trying to be braggadocious here. And you guys out there are experts in your respective fields. If you talk to me about how to be an electrician or something like that, you could probably get real technical too, so I wouldn't understand it. I'm trying to put it in much lay terms as I can so people can understand this. If you want more specifics, set up a time. I do 20-minute free individual consultations. I'd be glad to do it via the phone, via Skype, do it in person, a 20-minute free consultation. We can go over things, ask questions about what's going on in your lifestyle, and go from there. Guys, I don't see any other questions here, so I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. I just want to say thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you next time around. God bless.